My name is Eric Rivera, and I'm the lead pastor at the Brook Church in Chicago's Northwest Side, Montclair neighborhood. That means we're only minutes away from the 60639 zip code. That zip code happens to be the hardest COVID-hit zip code in the entire state of Illinois. And back in March, when things began to lock down here in Chicago, we as a leadership began to pray, strategize, and just ask God, how would He have us serve our community during this time? Because this crisis actually was an opportunity. One of the things that stood out to us the most was that when we saw the COVID-19 statistics here in Chicago, we learned that the Black and brown communities were the most acutely affected by it in terms of those getting the disease and those dying of the disease. And we realized one of the problems was access to food and getting food delivered to people. And so we partnered with other Chicago churches to help start something called Chicago Delivers, which ended up raising some $300,000 to provide gift cards and food delivery to people, to Black and brown people in neighborhoods most affected by COVID-19. You know, one of the beautiful things about that was to see how when the church comes together, we can see mighty and marvelous things happen by the hand of God to bless people who are having the greatest need. Was that we began to mobilize our real community groups, our missional communities, to serve our neighborhood. One of our groups began to sew face masks for the essential workers at the local high school, and they were so blessed by that. Another group made care packages for families that were vulnerable and struggling during this time. And still another real community group began to identify undocumented families in our neighborhood and deliver to them groceries. Within a few weeks, we as a church were able to identify groceries to 80 different households who were struggling because of COVID. But you know, one of the most exciting things for us was when our alderman's office contacted us and said they had a shipment of about 1,000 face masks that they needed to distribute to our neighborhood. They wanted to know if the Brook, if our church could be a distribution site. Of course, we said yes and began to pull together volunteers. A week later, another organization had 300 lunch boxes donated to them, asked if we could distribute those lunch boxes. The following week, they gave us 600 of them. And so what that meant was we began to block off the front of our church building. Cars would pull up, we'd hand them lunch boxes and face masks. But watch this. We also told them, hey, you could pull ahead where we had parking spots designated for prayer. So what happened was over these few distribution days, dozens of cars pulled up and they asked people, our team, to pray for them. Some would say, hey, we're anxious about COVID, or we know this household has COVID, would you pray for them? Others would say, hey, I was just diagnosed with cancer, could you pray for me? Some were saying, hey, I'm undocumented, I lost my job, we have no income. And request after request began to pour in through these cars, and our team was able to pray for these families. You know, God kept blowing us away through the connections He made. And a few things God told us during this time. He showed us this, that He just wants us to be available, to be able to give Him our yes, even when we didn't know how it was going to be pulled off. But we said, God, we want to say yes and trust You to allow things to happen the ways that You want it to happen. We need to trust that He'd provide. He also wanted us to remind us that we need to stay connected outside of our church walls. I mean, people were anxious. People are anxious. And the connections we had with our government, our local officials, our schools, actually became inroads to show and share the love of Jesus with people. And the last thing He showed us that I think is important for all of us to remember is don't grow weary of doing good. I mean, it gets tiring when we're serving, when we don't see fruit. But God is doing things when we don't even realize He's doing it. And I hope that serves as a reminder to you, as it's been to us, to stay on the grind, continue to serve Jesus, continue to share the gospel, continue to show that the church cares about people in our community. And in so doing, watch what God does as we give Him our yes. And let's pray for more opportunities, y'all. Peace.